When I put my key in my front door after a grueling 24-hour shift fixing a major security breach, it didn't work. I tried again. Nothing. As I stood there, confused and exhausted, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother-in-law. "We need $20,000. By Friday. The lawyer says we can't finalize things without it." In that moment, everything clicked. The missing financial statements. The late nights Derek claimed he was working. His mother suddenly living in our guest house. They weren't just betraying me. They were systematically stealing from me. They had been drugging my tea so they could discuss their plans while I slept. They had been using my money to buy vacation properties in their names. They had been telling my friends I was mentally unstable. They thought they chose the perfect victim, a workaholic too busy to notice their scheme. What they didn't realize is that my job gave me exactly the skills I needed to destroy them. They locked me out of my house. I'll lock them inside a prison cell. No forgiveness, no mercy, just pure, calculated vengeance. I stared at my key, then at the lock, then back at my key. 24 hours of emergency network security patches had left my mind foggy, but not so foggy that I didn't recognize my own front door. The key that had worked yesterday morning now refused to turn. "Come on," I muttered, jiggling it harder. Nothing. The brass doorknob gleamed back at me, unmoved by my growing frustration. I leaned my forehead against the door. All I wanted was a shower and 12 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Derek had promised to have dinner waiting when I got home. A small celebration for saving our biggest client from what could have been a catastrophic security breach. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Vivian. My mother-in-law's name flashed across the screen, followed by words that made my exhaustion evaporate. "We need $20,000 by Friday. The lawyer says we can't finalize things without it." I read it 3 times, each time feeling a cold clarity spreading through my chest. Lawyer? Finalize? The fog in my brain was lifting, replaced by crystalline awareness. I called Derek. Straight to voicemail. I called Vivian. Same result. Standing on my own doorstep, locked out of my own home, I began to see the past 6 months with perfect clarity. Derek's late nights, working on his startup. The way he'd convinced me to merge our accounts for simplicity. Vivian's sudden financial troubles that required her to move into our guest house. The missing financial statements. The whispered phone calls that stopped when I entered rooms. I walked back to my car, turned on the engine for warmth, and began to think. Not about how to get inside. That no longer mattered. I was thinking about the home security system I'd personally installed last year, the one with cameras in every room, the one that backed up to my private cloud server, the one that Derek had never bothered to understand because that's your department, honey. I pulled out my laptop and connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi. Within minutes, I was watching a live feed of my living room. Derek and Vivian sat on my couch, drinking my rare Japanese whiskey, laughing. "She has no idea," Derek was saying, swirling the amber liquid in the crystal tumbler I'd given him for our anniversary. "The lawyer says with her work schedule we can easily prove neglect. And with the records we've kept of her episodes, no judge will question her stability," Vivian added. "Once we get the final payment for the beach house property, we'll be set." I didn't feel the tears on my cheeks until they dripped onto my keyboard. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, clearing away the last of my exhaustion. I booked a room at the Marriott, showered, and changed into fresh clothes. Then I returned to my house, not to confront them, but to observe. Through the dining room window, I could see them entertaining friends. Our friends, my friends, Derek's. Arm was around a woman I didn't recognize. When he spotted me through the window, his face performed an impressive transformation. Concern replaced smug satisfaction as he hurried to the door. "Helena, thank God. We've been so worried." He lowered his voice as he stepped onto the porch. "You shouldn't be here right now. You're not well." "My key doesn't work," I said flatly. "We changed the locks yesterday after your episode. Don't you remember throwing the lamp?" threatening Vivian. His eyes conveyed perfect sincerity, as he fabricated events that never happened. "The doctor said you need rest, time away from work stresses." "What doctor?" I asked, my voice steady. "Helena, please. You're embarrassing yourself. Go back to the hotel. We'll have your things sent over. Behind him, Vivian appeared, her face a mask of manufactured concern. Derek, is she having another episode? Should I call Dr. Marshall? I looked from one to the other, noting every detail of their performance. Then I turned and walked away, ignoring Derek's calls that he was just trying to help. In my hotel room, I accessed the security system again. I watched them return to the party, watched Derek shake his head sadly as friends patted his shoulder consolingly. Watched Vivian dramatically recount some fictional breakdown I'd supposedly had. Poor Derek, someone said. How long has she been like this? It's been getting worse, Derek replied, his voice catching perfectly. The pressure at work, you know. She just can't handle it anymore. I closed my laptop, but not before setting the system to record everything. Every word, every plan, every lie. They thought they were dealing with an exhausted workaholic too busy to notice their betrayal. They didn't realize they were dealing with a woman who secured multinational corporations against the world's most sophisticated cyber threats. They were amateurs playing a professional's game. And I was just getting started. For the next 2 weeks, I maintained a careful facade of confusion and distress. I took a leave of absence from work, citing personal issues. I made tearful phone calls to Derek, playing the role of a woman unraveling. I left rambling voicemails for Vivian, begging to understand what was happening. All the while, I was building my case. From my hotel room, I created a secure workspace, 3 laptops, each with a different purpose. One for communications, one for financial tracking, one for surveillance. I established a VPN that even my own company would envy. The security system continued to record their every move. I watched them ransack my home office, searching for financial documents. I watched Derek call my company's HR department, inquiring about my retirement accounts and stock options. I watched Vivian coaching him on what to say to my friends, my colleagues, even my mother. Remember, she'd instruct, Helena's been struggling for months. You've tried everything to help her. This is for her own good. I traced every financial transaction for the past 3 years. The pattern was clear. Shortly after our wedding, small transfers began from our joint account to Derek's personal account, then to Vivian's, then to a series of LLC accounts I'd never heard of. Ocean View Properties, Sunset Investments, Coastal Opportunities, 3 different names for the same scheme. I discovered Derek wasn't even legally divorced from his previous wife. Their divorce had been filed but never finalized, a detail he'd conveniently omitted. I found Vivian's history of financial fraud, carefully concealed beneath name changes and moves across state lines. Most damning of all, I found their emails. Thousands of them, stretching back to before I even met Derek. Their plan laid out in meticulous detail. She's perfect, Derek had written 2 months after our first date. 6-figure salary, no family nearby, married to her job, just like we discussed. Don't rush it, Vivian replied. Make sure she's completely committed. We need at least 2 years of access to make this work. Each discovery should have hurt. Instead, each one strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about saving my marriage. This was about justice. On day 16, the divorce papers arrived. The allegations were exactly as I'd overheard. Financial irresponsibility, emotional instability, neglect. The documents demanded I vacate the house permanently and liquidate my retirement accounts to pay community debts. That same day, I discovered they'd been drugging me. The security footage showed Vivian adding something to my evening tea on nights when they needed to discuss their plans. I'd assumed my exhaustion was from overwork. In reality, they'd been sedating me to talk freely in my own home. The betrayal was so complete, so methodical, that any doubt I might have harbored evaporated. They weren't misguided. They weren't desperate. They were predators, and I was their intended prey. When Derek's lawyer called to discuss terms, I surprised him by requesting mediation instead of an immediate response. I just want to understand, I said, my voice deliberately shaky. I don't know what happened to us, Derek. I need to hear it from you. That night, I watched them celebrate. Derek opened an expensive bottle of champagne, purchased with my credit card, I noted, and toasted Vivian. She's falling apart, he laughed. Jackson says she's requesting mediation. Can you believe it? She wants to talk it out. Perfect, Vivian replied. The more unstable she appears, the better for us. By the time she realizes what's happening, we'll be in the Caymans. I smiled as I closed my laptop. Let them celebrate. Let them think I was broken. In 2 weeks, I had compiled more evidence than most prosecutors gather in a year. But I wasn't done yet. The following day, I received a notice that our joint savings account, my emergency fund, had been emptied. Derek had taken everything. I was supposed to panic, to call him, demanding answers. To create another episode they could document. Instead, I called in a favor from my college roommate Sarah, now a forensic financial investigator with the FBI. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. Just enough to pique her interest. I need to understand if what I'm seeing is really happening, I said. Send me what you have, she replied. And Helena, be careful. I was beyond careful. I was methodical. And while Derek and Vivian thought they were springing their trap, they were walking directly into mine. 3 days before the scheduled mediation, I lost access to my home security system. Derek had finally brought in someone to upgrade their security. I'd anticipated this move, installing a backup system they'd never find. A secondary set of cameras wired directly to an off-site server. Through this system, I watched Derek's security expert sweep the house for surveillance equipment. He found the obvious cameras, the ones I'd wanted him to find. He missed the secondary system entirely. That same day, I received a call from my attorney. He was withdrawing from my case. I'm sorry, Helena. I can't represent you anymore. They got to you, I said. It wasn't a question. His silence was answer enough. I wasn't surprised. Disappointed, but not surprised. Derek had connections in the legal community through his supposed startup. What he didn't know was that I had better ones. By nightfall, I had retained Patricia Mills, a divorce attorney known for handling high-profile cases involving financial fraud. I sent her my evidence, not everything, but enough to convince her I wasn't delusional. This is extensive, she said after reviewing my files. Most clients come to me with suspicions. You've brought me a case. I'm just getting started, I replied. The next morning, my closest friend Julia called. Her voice was strained, uncomfortable. Helena, I'm worried about you. Derek says you've been having problems. What exactly did Derek tell you, Julia? I kept my voice neutral, recording the conversation. That you've been paranoid, accusing him of things, that you might need help. She paused. He showed me texts you sent him. They were concerning. Did he show you the texts he sent to his mother? Planning how to take everything I own? Helena, please. This isn't you talking. This is the stress, Would you like to see my evidence, Julia? The security footage, the financial records, the emails? Silence. Then, what are you saying? I'm saying your friend Derek is a con man, and I'm taking him down. After I sent her a small sample of my evidence, Julia became my first ally. She confirmed what I'd suspected. Derek and Vivian had been systematically turning my friends against me, laying groundwork for their claims of my instability. That night, I made my first offensive move. I called Derek, my voice breaking with manufactured emotion. Please, can we talk? I don't understand what's happening to us. To me. His smugness was palpable. Of course, Helena. I'm worried about you. We all are. Could we meet? Before the mediation? Just us? He agreed immediately, suggesting a coffee shop downtown. Public, but quiet. Perfect for my purposes. I arrived first, chose a table in the corner, and positioned my phone carefully. When Derek arrived, his face showed exactly what I expected. Pity mixed with contempt, poorly disguised as concern. Helena, he said, reaching for my hand. You look terrible. I let him see what he wanted to see, a broken woman desperate to understand. I let him explain how my work stress had caused paranoid delusions, how he and Vivian had tried everything to help me, how this divorce was for my own good. I just need to understand about the money, I said, eyes downcast. The text from your mother about needing $20,000 for the lawyer. His explanation was smooth, rehearsed. Mom was texting me, not you. You weren't supposed to see that. We've been trying to help you, Helena. The lawyer is expensive, but necessary, for your sake. And the properties? Ocean View? Sunset Investments? A flicker of concern crossed his face, quickly masked. Those are business investments, Helena. My startup's assets. You know this. Purchased with my money. Our money, he corrected. Community property. And most of it is gone anyway. Your spending habits? My spending habits? I raised an eyebrow. The online shopping. The donations to those charities. The cash withdrawals. Transactions I'd never made. Withdrawals I'd never authorized. I let him continue, building a case against me using fabricated evidence. I see, I said finally. Thank you for explaining. Will you drop the mediation? Let's just finish this quickly, Helena. A clean break is best for everyone. I looked into his eyes I'd once loved, and saw nothing but calculation. I'll think about it. As I walked away, I sent the recording to Patricia. Another piece of evidence, another nail in his coffin. That night, I restored my access to all my financial accounts. I hadn't been spending compulsively, they had. I hadn't been making cash withdrawals, they had. I hadn't been donating to fake charities, they had. Using my name, my identity. I froze every account they'd been accessing. I reported the fraudulent transactions. I reversed what I could and documented what I couldn't. Then I waited for the explosion. It came at 3:17 a.m. My phone erupted with texts and calls from Derek, then Vivian. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched through my backup cameras as they panicked, realizing their access had been cut off. She knows, Vivian kept saying. She knows something. She doesn't know anything, Derek insisted. She's desperate. This changes nothing. But his face told a different story. For the first time, doubt had crept in. The prey was fighting back. The next morning, I received a threatening email from Derek's lawyer demanding I cease interfering with joint assets before the mediation. I forwarded it to Patricia without comment. Let them sweat, she replied. We're ready. And we were. The forensic accountant had connected Derek and Vivian's scheme to a larger pattern of real estate fraud spanning 3 states. My evidence had provided the missing link in an investigation that had been ongoing for months. As I prepared for the mediation, I felt no nervousness, no doubt. Only the calm certainty that justice, cold, precise justice, was finally within reach. The mediation room was deliberately intimidating, all dark wood and leather chairs. Derek and Vivian arrived first, with their attorney and a man I didn't recognize. The attorney was Jackson Warner, an aggressive divorce lawyer known for his scorched earth approach. The stranger was introduced as Dr. Marshall, the fictional psychiatrist they'd been invoking for weeks. I arrived last with only Patricia beside me. I'd chosen my appearance carefully. Conservative suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back, professional, controlled, the opposite of the unhinged woman they'd been describing. Derek's face showed momentary confusion. He'd expected disheveled, emotional, desperate. Instead, he got calm, composed, prepared. The mediator introduced himself and explained the process. Each side would present their case. He would then help us reach a settlement if possible. Jackson went first, presenting a narrative so divorced from reality that it was almost impressive. According to him, I was a workaholic who had suffered a mental breakdown after years of neglecting my marriage. Derek had tried everything to help me, but was forced to file for divorce when my behavior became erratic and concerning. The fabricated evidence was extensive: doctored text messages, manipulated photographs, statements from concerned friends who'd never spoken to me. Dr. Marshall testified about my condition despite never having met me. He presented a diagnosis of acute stress disorder with paranoid features, based entirely on Derek's reports. Throughout their presentation, I remained silent, taking notes. Patricia occasionally whispered questions or comments, but mostly we just watched them construct their elaborate fiction. When they finally finished, the mediator turned to us. Ms. Mills, would you like to present your client's response? Patricia smiled. Actually, before we do that, we'd like to invite 2 additional participants to join us. The door opened. Sarah entered, followed by a man in a suit who introduced himself as Special Agent Carter with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Derek's face drained of color. Vivian clutched her purse tighter. "What is this?" Jackson demanded. "This is completely inappropriate." "Before you continue," Patricia said calmly, "I should inform you that we have evidence that your clients have engaged in a pattern of criminal activity, including identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud. Agent Carter is here at our invitation to observe these proceedings." The mediator looked stunned. "This is highly unusual." "So is being drugged in your own home so your husband and mother-in-law can discuss how to steal your life savings," I said, speaking for the first time. "Shall we continue?" Patricia opened her laptop and connected it to the room's display system. "Let me be clear about what we're alleging. Mr. Shaw and Mrs. Shaw Sr. have engaged in a systematic campaign to defraud my client of her assets through a complex scheme involving identity theft, fraudulent property purchases, and manipulation of financial records." "These are baseless accusations," Jackson sputtered. "Are they?" Patricia began playing the security footage, Derek and Vivian discussing their plans in explicit detail. Their voices filled the room, incriminating themselves in their own words. "Once we get the final payment for the beach house property, we'll be set. She'll never trace the offshore accounts. By the time she figures it out, we'll be gone." Jackson tried to interrupt, claiming the recordings were illegally obtained. Patricia calmly explained that as the homeowner and installer of the security system, I had every legal right to those recordings. Next came the financial evidence, spreadsheets showing systematic transfers from our joint accounts to their secret LLCs, documentation of properties purchased with my money but titled in their names, proof of credit cards and loans taken out in my name without my knowledge. Derek's lawyer tried repeatedly to regain control of the narrative, but each attempt was met with another piece of irrefutable evidence. "And now," Patricia said, "the matter of Mr. Shaw's previous marriage." Derek's head snapped up. "Our investigation revealed that Mr. Shaw's divorce from his first wife was never finalized. The paperwork was filed but never completed, making his marriage to my client legally invalid." "That's ridiculous," Derek interjected. "Of course we were divorced." Patricia slid a document across the table. "This is confirmation from the county clerk's office. Your divorce was never finalized. You are still legally married to Jennifer Shaw." The room fell silent. Derek looked at his lawyer, who was staring at the document in disbelief. "There's more," Patricia continued. "We've uncovered evidence that this isn't Mr. Shaw and Mrs. Shaw Sr.'s first time engaging in this type of scheme." She presented documentation of 3 previous instances where Vivian had been investigated for similar financial frauds, operating under different names. Evidence connecting Derek to 2 of those cases. "This is a pattern of behavior," Patricia concluded. "A carefully orchestrated scheme to identify financially successful women, isolate them from support systems, and systematically drain their assets." The mediator looked shell-shocked. Jackson was frantically whispering with Derek and Vivian. Dr. Marshall had gone completely pale. "In light of these revelations," Patricia said, "we are withdrawing from mediation. We will be filing criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, falsification of medical records, and conspiracy. We will also be filing civil suits for the full recovery of all fraudulently obtained assets, plus punitive damages." "This is absurd," Derek finally managed. "Helena, you know this isn't true. You're sick. You need help." I looked at him directly, for the first time. "I've recovered all the emails between you and your mother dating back to before we met. The ones where you selected me as your target. The ones where you planned how to gaslight me into believing I was unstable." His face went completely white. "I've also recovered evidence of the sedatives you've been putting in my tea. The lab results came back yesterday. That's felony poisoning, Derek." Vivian suddenly stood. "I'm not feeling well. I need to." "Sit down, Mrs. Shaw," Agent Carter said firmly. "No one is leaving this room yet." When she reluctantly sat, I continued, my voice steady. "You thought my work hours meant I wasn't paying attention, that I was too busy, too trusting, too naive to notice what you were doing? What you failed to understand is that those work hours gave me exactly the skills I needed to dismantle your entire operation. I turned to Agent Carter. I believe you'll find all the evidence you need in the files I've provided. Names, dates, account numbers, properties, everything. This is extremely comprehensive, he agreed. We'll need formal statements, but this is more than enough to proceed with an investigation. Jackson finally found his voice. My clients need time to review these allegations. We request a continuation of the mediation after we've had time to. I'm withdrawing from this case, Dr. Marshall interrupted, standing abruptly. I was not aware of, I cannot be associated with. He grabbed his briefcase and hurried from the room. The mediator cleared his throat. Given the nature of these allegations and the involvement of law enforcement, I'm terminating this mediation. These matters will clearly need to be resolved in court. As everyone gathered their materials, I remained seated, watching Derek and Vivian. Their perfect plan was collapsing around them. Their faces showed the dawning realization that they weren't dealing with a victim anymore. They were facing an adversary who had outplayed them at every turn. You won't get away with this, Derek hissed as they prepared to leave. No one will believe you. I smiled slightly. They already do. As they walked out, Agent Carter approached me. We'll need to conduct formal interviews. This evidence connects to a larger investigation we've been pursuing. I'm at your disposal, I replied. I want them held accountable for everything they've done. Based on what I've seen today, he said, that's exactly what's going to happen. As I left the mediation room, I felt no triumph, no joy, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice was finally in motion. The locked door that had started, everything was now locking them into consequences they never anticipated. The hunt was over. Now came the reckoning. The weeks following the mediation moved with startling speed. Derek and Vivian were arrested 3 days later, charged with multiple felonies including fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The investigation quickly expanded to include their previous schemes, uncovering a pattern of behavior spanning nearly a decade. I worked closely with the prosecutors, providing testimony and evidence. The case against them grew stronger by the day as other victims came forward. Women like me who had been targeted, manipulated, and defrauded. Women whose lives had been nearly destroyed by the same predatory scheme. Derek's lawyer attempted to negotiate a plea deal, offering full restitution in exchange for reduced charges. The prosecutor called me to discuss the offer. It would guarantee you get your money back, she explained. All of it, and it would spare you a trial. And what would they get? I asked. Probation, most likely. Some community service, no jail. Time. I didn't hesitate. No deal. I want them to face everything they've done, every charge, every victim. The prosecutor smiled. That's what I was hoping you'd say. The criminal case proceeded. Bail was denied when investigators discovered Derek and Vivian had purchased one-way tickets to the Cayman Islands for the day after our originally scheduled mediation. Their plan to disappear with my money was documented in explicit detail through emails, text messages, and recorded conversations. Meanwhile, I focused on reclaiming my life. I hired a locksmith to change every lock in my house. I swept the entire property for any remaining surveillance they might have installed. I reclaimed my personal space, room by room, removing all traces of Derek and Vivian. Their belongings were packed and placed in storage, carefully inventoried, and documented with witnesses present. I took no chances with further accusations of impropriety. Financial recovery was more complex. The properties they had purchased using my identity and assets were tied up in legal proceedings. The offshore accounts they had established were frozen pending investigation. But my own accounts were secure again, my income protected, my future finances intact. The most difficult part was facing our social circle. The narrative Derek and Vivian had created, of my mental instability, my paranoia, my breakdown, had taken root among people I'd considered friends. Some had actively participated in their gaslighting campaign, others had simply believed what they were told without questioning. I chose not to pursue broad vindication. Those who had genuinely cared about me were shown the evidence and understood immediately. Julia became my fiercest defender, confronting those who had spread rumors about my mental health. Others reached out with apologies as news of Derek and Vivian's arrests spread. For the rest, I let their shame be punishment enough when the truth became public. 6 months after the mediation, Derek and Vivian went to trial. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, financial records, email trails, testimony from previous victims, the drugged tea samples I had preserved, the records of their planning, sessions when they thought I was unconscious. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. At the sentencing hearing, I was invited to make a victim impact statement. I stood before the court, facing Derek and Vivian directly for the first time since the mediation. I want to address something the defense has repeatedly suggested during this trial, I began. They've implied that I engineered an elaborate setup to frame 2 innocent people, that I manipulated evidence, fabricated conversations, and constructed a false narrative to punish my husband for wanting a divorce. I looked directly at Derek. The truth is much simpler. You chose the wrong target. You assumed my dedication to my career meant I wasn't paying attention to my life. You mistook my trust for weakness, my generosity for naivety, my exhaustion for obliviousness. I turned to Vivian. You orchestrated a scheme designed to destroy not just my finances, but my sense of reality. You attempted to convince me and everyone around me that I was losing my mind, that my perceptions couldn't be trusted, that I needed to be controlled and managed. I addressed the court again. The skills that made me valuable to them, my income, my professional status, were the same skills that allowed me to uncover and document their crimes. I didn't set a trap. I simply revealed the one they had built themselves. The judge sentenced Derek to 12 years in prison. Vivian received 8. Both were ordered to pay full restitution to all identified victims. As they were led away, Derek looked back at me once. I saw no remorse in his eyes, only rage at being caught, at being outplayed. I felt nothing as I watched them go. The emotional connection had been severed long ago, cut cleanly by the revelation of their true nature. They were strangers to me now, criminals whose punishment was just beginning. 1 year after the locked door that started everything, I stood in my home office, finalizing the paperwork for the sale of the last fraudulently purchased property. The assets had been recovered. The legal proceedings concluded. My financial security was restored, my professional reputation intact. My phone buzzed with a notification. An email from the Department of Corrections. Derek was requesting to speak with me. Something about additional assets he wanted to disclose. Another trap. Another manipulation. Another attempt to regain control. I deleted the email without responding and turned back to my work. My upgraded home security system blinked reassuringly in the corner, a small green light confirming that all was secure, all was protected. Outside, the locksmith was installing new smart locks on all exterior doors. Locks with my fingerprint as the only access point. No keys that could be duplicated, no codes that could be shared. No way in except on my terms. As I tested the new front door lock, I thought about the exhausted woman who had stood on this same step a year ago, bewildered by a key that suddenly didn't work. She had been betrayed but not broken, targeted but not defeated. The lock recognized my fingerprint immediately. The door opened smoothly, then closed behind me with a satisfying click. A perfect fit. Every single time. I returned to work 2 weeks after the sentencing, welcomed back with respect and admiration. My company had been understanding throughout the ordeal, offering me flexible hours and resources once they understood what had happened. My skill set had proven valuable not just in the courtroom but in rebuilding my professional standing. My first major project was leading our team in developing a new security protocol specifically designed to protect individuals from identity theft and financial fraud. I channeled everything I had learned from my personal ordeal into creating safeguards for others. The protocol was eventually adopted as an industry standard, bearing my name. The Shaw Protocol, my boss announced at the launch event. Protecting good people from predators. The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek's name, which he had forced upon me through a fraudulent marriage, was now associated with protecting victims from people exactly like him. I received an invitation to speak at a conference on cybersecurity and personal protection. My presentation, detailing how sophisticated predators use technical and psychological manipulation to victimize successful professionals, received widespread attention. Without naming Derek and Vivian, I outlined their methods in clinical detail, exposing the patterns that others might recognize in their own relationships. The most dangerous predators don't look like threats, I explained to the packed audience. They look like partners. They look like family. They look like support systems. The presentation was recorded and shared widely across professional networks. It became required viewing for financial advisors, therapists, and law enforcement. I began receiving messages from people who recognized their own situations in my descriptions, people who found the courage to investigate their suspicions because of what I shared. 6 months after the sentencing, I received a certified letter from Vivian. Her neat, controlled handwriting filled 3 pages with accusations and justifications. She claimed Derek had manipulated her, that she was the real victim, that I had destroyed her life through vindictiveness. I handed the letter directly to Agent Carter without reading beyond the first paragraph. She's attempting to contact victims from prison. That violates her conditions, he replied, taking the letter. We'll handle it. 2 weeks later, I learned Vivian had lost all privileges and had 6 months added to her sentence. Her attempt to regain control had only tightened her constraints. Derek was more persistent. He had fellow inmates send messages through third parties, attempting to reach me through social media, through mutual acquaintances, even through my company's general contact form. Each attempt was documented, reported, and added to his record. His desperation to reestablish contact told me everything I needed to know. Prison had taken his freedom, but what truly tortured him was his complete lack of power over me. His inability to manipulate my perception or access my resources was the real punishment. I channeled my experience into creating a foundation for victims of financial abuse and identity theft. We provided legal resources, technical support, and psychological counseling for people escaping situations similar to mine. The foundation partnered with law firms willing to work pro bono for victims who couldn't afford representation. At our first fundraising gala, I found myself surrounded by supporters, including several of Derek and Vivian's previous victims. We had formed an unlikely community, bound by our shared experience and determination to protect others. Jennifer Shaw, Derek's actual legal wife, approached me during the event. She was a quiet woman with intelligent eyes that had seen too much. I tried to warn you, she said softly. 3 years ago, I sent you an email. I remembered it suddenly. A strange message from an unknown sender that had gone to my spam folder. I'd deleted it without reading, assuming it was a phishing attempt. He convinced me I was crazy too, she continued. For years. I almost believed him. Then I found the same evidence you did, but I wasn't strong enough to fight back the way you did. I just ran. You survived, I told her. That's strength too. She smiled slightly. Maybe, but you did what I couldn't. You exposed them. You stopped them. The foundation grew rapidly, attracting attention from media, lawmakers, and security experts. I was invited to testify before a congressional committee on digital privacy and financial protection laws. My testimony helped shape legislation that would make it harder for others to perpetrate the kind of fraud Derek and Vivian had committed. The existing laws treat digital identity theft as a property crime, I explained to the committee. But it's much more invasive than that. When someone steals your identity to commit fraud, they're not just taking your money. They're taking your reputation, your security, your peace of mind. They're taking your voice. That should be recognized in how we classify and punish these crimes. The Shaw Act was passed the following year, increasing penalties for identity theft when combined with intimate partner abuse or exploitation of fiduciary relationships. Derek, watching from prison, saw the woman he had tried to destroy reshape the legal system that would judge people like him more harshly. When a major news outlet contacted me about doing a feature story on my experience, I agreed on one condition. They had to include the stories of other victims as well. The resulting documentary, Locked Out, Fighting Back, became a catalyst for national conversation about financial abuse and technological gaslighting. Derek and Vivian's full history was exposed to public scrutiny. Former friends, colleagues, and targets came forward with their own stories, creating a comprehensive picture of their decades-long pattern of predation. Their complete unmasking was more devastating than any single criminal charge could have been. I never responded to their attempts at contact, never engaged with their narratives, never gave them the opportunity to reframe or explain. My silence was the final lock on the door between us, and I held the only key. 3 years after the locked door incident, I received a notification that Derek was up for his first parole hearing. The prosecutor called to ask if I would make a statement at the hearing. "You don't have to," she assured me. "Your written statement would be sufficient. But victim impact statements delivered in person tend to carry more weight." I considered declining. My life had moved forward considerably. The foundation was thriving, helping hundreds of victims reclaim their lives and financial independence. The Shaw Protocol had become standard practice in cybersecurity circles. My professional reputation had never been stronger. But something about facing Derek one more time felt necessary. Not for closure, I had found that long ago, but for completion of the circle that began with that key that wouldn't turn. The parole hearing was held in a sterile room at the correctional facility. I wore a navy suit, similar to the one I'd worn at the mediation years before. My hair was shorter now, my posture more confident. I no longer looked like someone who could be victimized. Derek entered in prison attire, thinner than I remembered, hair graying at the temples. His eyes found mine immediately, and I could see him assessing, calculating, trying to find some emotional lever to pull. Old habits die hard. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium calmly. "I'm not here to discuss the crimes Mr. Shaw committed against me. Those are well documented. I'm here to discuss what happened after." I detailed the pattern of attempted contact from prison, the messages sent through third parties, the letters addressed to my friends and colleagues, the persistent attempts to re-establish control. "Mr. Shaw has not accepted responsibility for his actions," I concluded. "He has not acknowledged the harm he caused. He has not stopped trying to manipulate his victims. He remains exactly the person who calculated, executed, and nearly succeeded at destroying multiple lives for financial gain. The only difference is that now he does it from behind bars." The parole board denied his request unanimously. As he was led from the room, Derek's facade finally cracked. "This is all because of you," he snarled. "You've ruined my life." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The record spoke for itself. Outside the facility, the prosecutor walked me to my car. "That was powerful," she said. "Especially since we know he's been communicating with Vivian about restarting their operation once she's released next year." I stopped walking. "He what?" She looked surprised. "I'm sorry, I thought you knew. We've been monitoring their communications. They've been planning to target wealthy inmates' families for post-release financial services. Same scheme, new hunting ground." I processed this information silently, then made a decision. I want those records. All of them. 6 weeks later, our foundation launched a new initiative specifically focused on protecting families of incarcerated individuals from financial exploitation. We partnered with the Department of Corrections to provide workshops and resources directly to vulnerable families. The materials included case studies of common exploitation tactics, heavily featuring redacted communications between Derek and Vivian outlining their intended methods. Without naming them explicitly, we turned their playbook into a warning manual. Word of the initiative reached Vivian in prison. Her parole hearing, scheduled for the following month, suddenly faced new scrutiny as correctional officers reviewed the communications we'd highlighted. Her release date was pushed back by 2 years. Meanwhile, the documentary based on my experience had gained international attention. It was screened at film festivals and picked up by a major streaming service. Derek and Vivian became infamous. Their methods exposed to millions. Their names became shorthand for a particular type of calculated financial predation. 7 years after the night my key didn't work, I published a book titled Locked Out. It wasn't a memoir, but rather a comprehensive guide to recognizing, escaping, and recovering from targeted financial abuse. It became required reading in criminal psychology courses and social work programs across the country. For the book tour, I returned to my hometown where Derek and I had first met. The local news covered my visit extensively, interviewing people who had known us both. Former colleagues of his came forward with stories of small scams and manipulations they'd witnessed but never reported. The complete picture of who he had always been emerged in stark relief. At my final book signing, an elderly woman approached the table. "I'm Eleanor," she said quietly. "Derek's mother. His real mother." I studied her face, seeing faint traces of Derek in her features. Vivian claimed to be his mother. "Vivian is my husband's sister," she explained. "Derek left home at 18 and cut contact with us. We didn't hear from him for 15 years until we saw him on the news." Her hands trembled slightly as she placed a small stack of letters on the table. "He's been writing to us from prison, asking for money, claiming he was framed. When we saw your book, we knew he was lying." I looked at the unopened letters. More manipulation, more lies. "Thank you for telling me this. We wanted you to know that he wasn't raised this way," she said, "and we're sorry for what he did to you." That night, I added a new chapter to the digital edition of my book, explaining how predators like Derek often falsify their entire backgrounds, inventing family relationships to create credibility and sympathy. With Eleanor's permission, I included her story as evidence that the deception often extended to their own families. 9 years into his sentence, Derek was transferred to a minimum security facility due to good behavior. He immediately began working in the facility's computer lab, teaching basic skills to other inmates. It seemed innocuous, until an alert from one of the security systems I had designed flagged unusual activity. Derek had been using his position to access online accounts, creating fake profiles and attempting to contact potential victims. The Foundation's monitoring system, implemented in partnership with correctional facilities nationwide, caught the activity within hours. His privileges were revoked. His sentence was extended. His carefully constructed appearance of rehabilitation collapsed completely. I received a message from the prison warden thanking me for the security system that had prevented potential new victims. "The Shaw Protocol worked exactly as designed," he wrote. 10 years after that night, I stood in the doorway of my home, watching another moving truck depart. I had sold the house, not out of fear or bad memories, but because my foundation had grown so large that I was relocating to Washington, D.C. to work more closely with legislators and advocacy groups. As I locked the door for the final time, I thought about keys, about locks, about security systems, both technological and emotional, about the ways we protect what matters, about how being locked out had ultimately freed me. I left the key under the mat for the new owners, a young couple starting their life together. With it, I left a note with information about the Shaw Protocol and the Foundation's resources, not because I suspected anything about their relationship, but because knowledge is its own form of protection. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. 10 years ago, I had stood on this porch, locked out and betrayed. Today, I was walking away by choice, holding keys to something much larger than a single home. As I drove away, my phone rang. It was a reporter, asking for comment on breaking news. Vivian had been released from prison that morning. By afternoon, she had been arrested again, attempting to access accounts that no longer existed, trying to resurrect a scheme that had been thoroughly exposed. Some people never learn. Some traps spring closed again and again, catching the same predators who set them. I declined to comment. My work spoke for itself. The Shaw Protocol, the Foundation, the legislation, the book, the documentary, the lives saved and protected, the predators exposed and contained. I didn't need the last word. I had built something much more powerful, a legacy of protection, a system of security that would long outlast Derek and Vivian's capacity to cause harm. The key that hadn't fit had unlocked something much more valuable than a front door. It had revealed my own capacity to transform betrayal into protection, not just for myself, but for countless others who might otherwise have stood where I once stood, bewildered and alone on their own doorsteps. Their keys would always fit. I had made sure of that.